How you doing, everybody? I thought I'd crochet for a little while this afternoon and have a cup of coffee, and so I thought I'd spend a little time with you in case you wanted to have some company and talk a little bit about the John Bolton book, which I finally finished. The Room Where It Happened, which caused so much controversy earlier in the year when the Trump administration tried to have it blocked from publication, but then it was published. And, from the way that the interviews went and the way it came out in the media, it seemed like it was going to be this Trump bashing book. It was not. I want you just to know. It was such a long book that I doubt many people read it. At least many people probably didn't finish it. They may have started it. There were very few real serious criticisms of Trump. There were some, but it was mostly a very detailed explanation of John Bolton's experience in the Trump administration, both how he came to be the National Security Advisor, how long it took him to become the National Security Advisor. He wanted to be the Secretary of State and was disappointed that he didn't get that job, that he was overlooked in his opinion, first by Tillerson and then by Pompeo. But when he finally gets the job as National Security Advisor, and you can tell that was sort of a thing that stuck in his craw, that he was overlooked. There's no doubt the guy has massive experience. He worked for Reagan, he worked for Bush 41, he worked for Bush 43. Everyone knows and thinks of him as a hawk. He clearly is that. He dislikes the media as much as Trump does. Whenever he describes a media event, he calls them a mob. The mob was there. It would be funny if it wasn't having such a profound effect on the way the American public views the information that's coming through the press. These kinds of statements and descriptions of the work that journalists are doing is having such an effect on the way the American public sees information that I think it's dangerous. So I don't see it as funny, even though my initial reaction was, well, at least they agreed on that. He speaks with respect about the president in some instances. He talks about how the president would read and reread and be diligent about speeches that he would give and about decisions being made. But then where he's critical is about Trump's complete lack of understanding about some foreign affairs. I mean, the one that sticks in my mind is they were at a meeting of, I think they were in India, and President Trump was talking with, I want to say it was the Prime Minister of India. This was earlier in the book. And he said something to the effect of, well, it's not like you share, they were talking about China and the effect that China was having on India. And he said, well, it's not like you share a border with China or anything. He didn't know that India and China shared a border. Some basic holes in his understanding of the world and so when he said that, the room sort of took on this tone of, we can't even continue this conversation because there's such a lack of understanding of basics. He gives detailed explanations of his role in all of the major points of foreign policy along the way, including North Korea. It was frustrating for him because he felt like President Trump was giving too much away. Like, you would never agree to meet with someone like Kim Jong-un unless you were getting something first. You needed to get something like confirmation that he was, taking steps, real, quantifiable, verifiable steps to back off on his military program before you'd even meet with him. But what frustrated him about President Trump is that the whole of President Trump's view of his foreign policy with Kim Jong-un was, he likes me, I like him, that's it. Because that's the way he did business. He did business based on sort of a sense of the other person. I'm just making a video, honey. Do you want to be on the video? No? I'll be done in a little bit. Do you need something? I'll be done in a little bit, and I'll come see you. Okay? I'm on the video. I'll come see you. That was just my younger son. He wants to talk about his allowance, probably. I'll come talk to him in a minute. So that was frustrating to him, that because for him and for all the other people who were in government, what's that for, honey?
A game.
For me?
Oh, no.
For saving?
No, I'm buying a game.
You're buying a game. Oh, all right, honey. Thank you. Hey, Aiden! 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 What game is he buying? I need to know that. Well, I can always delete it if I don't think it's okay. He, like the other people who were experts in the State Department, who had been students of and worked in foreign policy in the State Department and in other areas, who had studied this, they knew that you don't give up things and you can't base it on personal relationships. But these people, whether at the highest level of National Security Advisor or all the people down below them, I think some of these people are people who are sometimes referred to as the deep state, because these are the people who have studied and have expertise but aren't always in agreement with the president. I don't think it's necessarily a negative thing. It's that they have years and years and years of experience in working with these other countries who are sometimes adversaries. And that experience counts for something. Now, the president can disagree with them, certainly. And when he does, we follow what the president says. But in President Trump's instance, he's sometimes making decisions without a lot of factual background, is what Bolton is saying, which was frustrating to him. He does talk about the Ukraine instance, which became the basis of the impeachment proceeding at the end of the book. And he's very critical of the Democrats proceeding with the impeachment. He calls it impeachment malpractice. He is very critical of Rudy Giuliani. He thinks he had no business being over there in Ukraine, no business inserting himself in the middle of what were affairs of the United States, and that he should not have been an individual actor, that it made it difficult for John Bolton, who was speaking to leaders of Ukraine, to have this other actor who was also speaking to the same leaders. And they would say to John Bolton, am I supposed to be talking to him and doing what he says? And Bolton would pretty much say, no, you talk to me. He's not a representative of the United States government. And yet he was there at the president's request. So that got very muddy and was frustrating for Bolton, and probably was part of what led to his resignation. I love the title of the book, and I do think it might have been prompted, at least in part, on the song from the musical Hamilton. Bolton does not, I listened to the book on tape and also have it in written form because I like to make notes, but I would listen to it sometimes on my walks. Bolton doesn't read the book on tape, but he does read the afterword. And he makes a reference to another part of the Hamilton musical. There is a wonderful song in Hamilton called The Room Where It Happens. That, people want to be in the room where it happens. And I think it's a terrific title, because Bolton was in the room where it happens. This book is a description of what he experienced in that room. He's not telling you to agree with him. He's not asking us to agree with him. This is what he experienced. And what I get frustrated by, and I bet you might too, is that I get frustrated by commentary and sometimes opinion that masquerades as fact by people who were not in the room where it happens. I want to hear from individuals in first person. This is what happened, instead of the constant analysis that is offered as fact by those who were not in the room where it happened. This is why I love autobiography. I love to hear it from the people who were in the room where it happened. So it's laborious, to be sure, but man, it is a great description of history that just took place. So if you're looking for it to be a gotcha against President Trump, you'll be disappointed. That's not what it is. But that's not what I wanted. That's not what I was looking for. So I was not disappointed. I was looking for a little bit of history written by someone who had been in the room where it happened. And so I wasn't disappointed at all. If you're looking for it to be an affirmation from a very hawkish advisor, you won't be disappointed. He is himself. He is the person you know as the former Fox News commentator. That is who John Bolton is consistently and still is. You might be a little frustrated with his occasional criticism of President Trump, but it's not frequent. It's infrequent in the book. The biggest criticism he makes of the president is that he said in the entirety of his working in the administration, he did not see a single thing the president did that he doesn't think was in furtherance of the president's desire to get reelected. That was the sharpest criticism. But as I pondered that, I thought that is probably a criticism that you could make of many first-term presidents. Hopefully not that harsh. Hopefully, I like to say this, and perhaps it's naive, more of our first-term presidents took actions that were purer to benefit the nation, that were not just taken with the hope of benefiting their reelection chances. But I don't think that's probably too far from a criticism that could be landed on many first-term presidents. I am nearly finished with another book I recommend to you that was written by one of our former defense secretaries, Robert Gates. Now I'm going to forget the title of it for you. I'll give it to you the next time. He's written several books, but it's about the symphony of power that countries have to wield. Isn't this interesting? Because written by a guy who is known for wielding military power, he talks about how countries make the mistake of not sufficiently utilizing other means of power, economic power, using the power of humanitarian aid, using propaganda. He talks in that book about what an expert Russia has become in utilizing the power of hacking and of misinformation on the internet, and how not only have we not answered them in terms of protecting ourselves against their use of this power, but we have not retaliated against them in terms of a misinformation campaign in their own country, and we have not used that power to protect ourselves in our own country. He talks about how there have been so many instances where we could have used other forms of power before military power, and they would have been more effective than military power. he's just a fascinating writer. And from his many years as defense secretary, and I think he was the head of the CIA before then, it's a fascinating perspective. I wish I could remember the title. I'll have to have that for you next time. The most recent chapter I'm thinking of, he was talking about the times that we have gone in militarily to countries. He said in Iraq, we went in and we stayed in for nation building, and it was a disaster. He said in Syria, we did not go in and we did not stay in, and it was a disaster. In some other countries, we've gone in but not stayed in, and it was still a disaster. Militarily, without using the other forms of the symphony of power at our discretion, can be a disaster. We've got to use these other forms of power. So interesting. Anyway, I'm going on and on about my books. I've been reading and listening to a lot of books on tape recently. Because, and here again, Robert Gates was in the room where it happened. I've been longing to hear these first account descriptions of what's gone on in recent history, because I hear so much, frankly, nonsense, and I can't take it anymore. I hear so many claims that are just not true, and I think to myself, I need to hear first-person accounts, and maybe even only first-person accounts for a while, so that I can clear out this might have happened, that seems awfully fishy to me, that might have happened. I can't take the conspiracy theories anymore. They're making me ill. So I go to the only thing. It's like back to my legal training of, I want everything that's inadmissible out of my mind, and I want to listen only to those who have real evidence to present, so that I can clear my mind of the clutter of just inadmissible evidence and thrown out there it's so easy to make an accusation with no evidence in support. I want to clear all of that crap out of my thinking about the world I'm living in. And I want to understand the world in a clearer way. And I try to do that even when I'm on the air. I try and, when I'm interviewing someone, ask them only about what they're able to answer. What do you know? Share with me what you know. In fact, we had a story on today that was sort of frustrating, because I thought to myself, this man is speculating, and I hesitate to put it on the air. There was a plane crash in southern Utah, and the man was speculating as to the reason for the crash, because the crash was caused by the plane hitting a communications tower. And the flight instructor who was interviewed said, more and more it costs a lot to maintain these planes, and some pilots are just they're taking risks and cutting corners and not maintaining these planes, and it's leading to things like, does he have any firsthand knowledge that had anything whatsoever to do with that crash? Could it just as easily have been a heart attack on the part of that pilot, or something else that had nothing to do with maintenance of that plane? And I felt like we were doing a disservice to the family of that pilot in airing that piece. So, but I'm not in charge of everything that goes on the air, and so I don't have control at the time other than to suggest. So I suggest and hope that I can steer sometimes in the right direction of, let's stick to what people know and share that. And then you and I can talk about what we've learned from what we know. I'm going on and on. How are you doing? Isn't the world a crazy place right now? Isn't it just a crazy place? When I woke up to go on the air this morning, so it's about 3:30, my son, my 15-year-old son, was still awake, and his mind was just filled with thoughts about his life, about what he was going to do in school and what he was going to study, and how he wanted to start saving when he got his first job, if he could get a job this year, and how he didn't want to make the mistake of not saving. He'd seen one of his YouTube guides that he watches talks about how if only he had started saving when he was early on in his career, he'd have so much more money right now, but instead he just blew it. And so Ethan was just excited about wanting to start, and I thought, man, this kid, he's 15 years old and his mind is alive with, and I wish that I could have spent more time talking, but I had to go to work. It was a beautiful thing to see his mind alive with thoughts about learning and saving and what is to come in life. How beautiful. In him, in that moment, I thought, that is what life is about. Learning and saving and living and loving. I want to focus more on that and less on criticism every day. That is my goal. So I'll drink to that. I won't bore you with anything else. If you ever have any topic that you want me to address during one of these Crocheting and Coffee conversations, let me know and I'll give it a shot. In the meantime, I hope you have company, sufficient company, and I hope you always know that people care about you. And I know that company is an important thing, that we need to not feel alone. So from me to you, know that you are cared about in the world, and we're not alone. So you take care of yourself, and until next time.